What is going on, guys? Welcome back and good morning or good night, whatever time it is you're watching this. Today we are going to be jumping back on this guy right here. Going to be jumping back on the Evo. A couple of things we need to try to get done today. We are going to try to go for pulling off this thermostat housing right here, which should expose the pipe that this hose is connected to, which is a coolant crossover tube that goes behind the motor. If you look here, this thing's looking pretty gross, pretty greasy. Back here also very greasy, so we're gonna try to take this off. There is a bolt that's broken off in here that I can try to extract a little bit easier if I have it on my workbench compared to having it in the engine bay. So I do believe it's just 1 and 2 screws holding it in left, because one over here has already been taken out for a bracket that was in the way. So we are making definitely some progress on the motor. However, I am at a certain point with the motor where I'm kind of deciding whether I want to really go full blown with it and actually pull the motor out, or kind of just try to work around the motor in the engine bay. I don't know if I really want to be pulling the whole motor, because then I have to unbolt the transmission from the transfer case, which, if you don't know the way these motors and transmission work, the crankshaft goes that way, pistons go up and down, turns the transmission with your gears, and then to transfer that power, there's something back there called a transfer case. So it takes the power from the motor, brings it to the transmission, and then transfers that to the transfer case, which then can put it to the axles, the drive shaft, and your differentials, and that's how the car moves. So the issue I'm running into is I don't really know if I do want to go full blown with that. I don't know if I want to have to pull the motor. If I do pull the motor, I'm likely not going to separate the transmission from the motor, just because we know how my luck with clutches is. And so I think what I am going to do for today is just try to go ahead, get that coolant thermostat housing off, try to see if I can get that water pipe off, get those guys cleaned up, because really the point of today is going to be trying to get those two things off, bring them over to the workbench, and I need to try to start removing any of the rust from any of the hard lines that were attached to the intake manifold from the prior video, which I can link probably right up there if you do want to go watch that. But with that, I'll probably throw this on a time lapse, just try to get those two things off and see if we can just get cleaning without breaking anything today. So let's get that done. Just a little tip for anyone that is doing this, just be careful, there is still going to be coolant in that pipe. There is a nipple in the back that there was a little bit of coolant leaking out of, so I know there is still some in there. And obviously that is the thermostat housing, so there likely will be coolant in there. So just be ready with a towel that it might actually come out at you. Okay, so just a couple of things I want to point out from that time lapse. If you look down here, there were a couple of sensors. We had a coolant temp sensor right here. It's this little guy that plugs in. Maybe you saw it in the time lapse, but make sure you label everything. It's just gonna make it so much easier down the road. I just wrote coolant temp sensor front of thermostat housing, so like I just know where it goes. This little guy right here, he was a little rounded on top, but I was able to get him out. It's this little bracket here, which I will eventually de-rust and touch up. I was wrong. There's actually one more bolt. It's back here down the bottom. It's just a bunch of 12mm bolts. These guys were no problem to get out, so hopefully that guy won't be. So I'll probably just actually keep it on a video like this, not a time lapse. Take that last bolt out and then hopefully pop that guy off. Alright, so that was pretty painless. This guy right here, it's a smaller, shorter bolt. That goes in the bottom back there. So now we can go ahead and try to pop this guy off. Hopefully coolant won't go absolutely everywhere. Nope, luckily it wasn't too bad. But I mean, you can see, that's my gasket. It's just completely broken off. So it's a good thing we're going through re-sealing that. Got a new thermostat to put in. And it's good that we took it off, because you can see, maybe you can see, there's just tons of grease here from the valve cover. So when it comes to the coolant crossover pipe in the back here, it does seem like it's just one bolt. It's right down here under, I guess, this valve. It's right above this guy. It is 112 millimeter. I thought it might have been pretty tough to get to. Turns out it actually wasn't. It turns out it wasn't stuck at all, and it's coming right out. So I'm gonna zip that out, and then I'll hopefully be able to show you a video of taking this thing off. On the other side, I don't know if you can see down there, there's sort of a little silver type bracket that it goes into. There's just an O-ring in there, so I'm gonna have to pull towards me, and hopefully it should come right out. It's a short little guy. And let's see if we can try to wiggle this guy out and not get coolant absolutely everywhere. It's definitely free. That O-ring is doing its job though, that's for sure. Oh yeah, I need to get a bucket. Okay, now that I have a bucket that will hopefully catch any falling coolant. So it does seem like there's a good amount coming out right here. I can try to go ahead and get this guy removed again. So you can feel it wiggles around. Yeah, there we go. All right, cool. It wasn't even that much coolant, but that's free now. So I will leave all this here to keep dripping. And I'll just go ahead and throw this on the workbench. Okay, now that we have everything off, I do really just want to show everyone down here just what we're dealing with. I mean, how rusty it is, how much like grease and spilt coolant there is. This definitely is going to be a project to try to remove all this rust. I mean, this dipstick tube, I have a new one, but like even just trying to remove this, I broke the dipstick off, so it's not, it doesn't really want to budge. So I guess I'm going to try to hit that with PB Blaster eventually and see what happens. You can still see I got coolant leaking even though I have a little towel in here. But I have a bucket underneath anyway. So with that, let's jump over here and take a look at what we have to de-rust. So this is what we have to get done with the throttle body. Just looking really dull. I'm gonna try to wire wheel it, try to get it back to nice, not shiny, but like newer looking. This bracket here, you can see the coolant pipe is just really rusted. This bracket right here for the intake manifold, the EGR valve, this coolant housing, thermostat housing, it's not looking so great. Fuel rail's looking pretty old. So I definitely have my work cut out for me in the future as far as wire wheeling and cleaning things up. Did want to show at least some of the bolt restoration. These bolts are from the last video for the throttle body, I believe. The media has definitely taken a beating, but you can see they are pretty new looking, not rusty anymore. That's one of them. So they're not looking bad. The thing definitely does its job. That's what it looks like after. It is pretty dusty in there. Now that we do have all this stuff off, I'm gonna start trying to chip away at this one thing at a time. So I'll probably leave it on this format of a video for just a minute, just while I talk about some things I've been thinking about with the car. So I'm trying to decide, it's probably still gonna be cool and going everywhere. Trying to decide on what kind of intercooler piping to do, because honestly, with the speed density setup that I am going for anyone that doesn't know, there's two types of ways you can measure the air going into the motor. One of them is a mass airflow sensor, usually plugs in right at the intake, and that just measures the air temperature and the velocity at which the air is moving through the pipe. That way the engine knows how much fuel to put in. The other way to do it is called speed density. It is similar. If your mass airflow sensor just decides to crap out on you, it is really hard for the car to move, so you'll probably be put into a limp mode, or you might not even be able to turn the car on until you get it fixed. With speed density, there's a better chance that you can actually still at least drive yourself home. The way speed density works is you take, instead of having a mass airflow sensor, you have the manifold absolute pressure sensor, which goes into the intake manifold where the air is being put into the motor. And then somewhere along the way on the intercooler piping, you'll have a little bung welded in, so you can screw in an intake air temperature sensor. So the computer will take the pressure in the manifold, and it'll take the intake air temperature going into the manifold. And from there, it'll be able to figure out how much fuel to put in. The issue I'm having is that I'm switching to speed density. So in order to switch there, my intercooler piping needs to have a bung for the intake air temp sensor, and it has to have a new flange for the blow-off valve to fit onto. Because the stock blow-off valve on these cars. They actually recirculate the air that comes out of it back into the intake. With the new intake that I have and with speed density, you just vent it to the atmosphere, which gives you that cool turbo noise that everyone loves. So I'm thinking it might just be better for me to just buy brand new intercooler piping that already has the bung and the flange for the blow-off valve already on it. So the options I was looking at was, I was looking at ETS, which that's what I have in the STI, and everyone knows they're a good company. So I was looking at ETS. They do have a shorter routing intercooler piping, which deletes like 2 feet worth of line, which creates more, less bends, less resistance, so you can get a little more power, and apparently the turbo will spool a little quicker. But with that, you have to get a smaller sized battery, because the new intercooler piping, it's not able to work its way around and route with a stock size battery. So in addition to the $350 you're going to spend for just the upper intercooler piping, you would also have to spend close to $400 on a new battery and a new tray to mount the battery on. Did turn out that ETS does in fact have a stock path intercooler piping, so I was thinking maybe that. And they're really nice looking parts. They come in wrinkle black, so they're really aesthetically pleasing in an engine bay. But at the same time, there's a company called InGen, and they have an intercooler piping kit for this car, which actually includes the upper and lower, where with ETS it's sold separately. But it just doesn't look as nice, to be honest. It's like polished aluminum, so it's like, it looks like stainless steel, which honestly I'm not as big of a fan of. So I'm trying to figure that out. And then another thing that I have been considering or thinking about is with the turbo. With the turbo, I have to take off the hot side where the O2 housing meets the hot side of the turbo, because one of the things I have been thinking is that it's possible that it's not actually it could not be that it has blown oil seals. It could be that there's, at some point when the car was run, there was too much positive crankcase pressure. So where the crankshaft is pushing the pistons up and down, if you're running a lot of high boost, it creates more pressure there. And I'm thinking possibly the stock PCV system just wasn't really suited to deal with that kind of pressure. Which would actually happen is, I don't know if anyone remembers in one of the prior videos where I was taking the turbo out, I'll link that guy over here. You have like from the oil pan, there's a tube that goes up to the bottom of the turbo. That's where the oil from the top of the turbo that goes in drains out back into the pan. If there's too much positive crank pressure, it'll actually sort of shoot aerified oil up there and then back into the turbo. So if you have it on both sides of the turbo, both the hot and the cold, then you know you're dealing with crankcase pressure. If it's just on the compressor, the cold side, then I'm probably dealing with oil rings, and then I would have to get the turbo rebuilt. Still haven't found someone to rebuild the turbo, but it's something I'm trying to look into. So we did get this guy off, so I'm going to go ahead, throw it on a time lapse probably, and try to at least see if I can wire wheel a little of the surface rust off. So let's get to it. Oh, and remember, safety first. So you can kind of see the problem that I'm running into with this guy here, because there is some surface rust, but you can see there is like an outer protective layer for the bare metal. So when I'm trying to get the rust off, I'm taking that protective layer off. So I'm gonna have to try to figure out a way to reseal this guy once all the rust is removed, because the issue is you can remove all the rust you want, but if you don't end up resealing it, the rust will just eventually come back. I do plan on only really driving this car when it's dry out. I'm not gonna drive it in the rain, and it does stay in my garage, which during the summer it is humidity controlled in here. So it's not something I really crazily have to worry about, but at the same time, I would like to try to refinish it. And I think these guys are like $380 now, so I'm definitely not trying to buy a new one for just a little hunk of metal that doesn't help the engine at all. It's for emissions. But yeah, so I mean, you can see I'm gonna have to try to find some kind of other way to restore that. So this is where we're at after all that. You can see some of the spots, you know, they clean up pretty well, but there's other spots where the rust is just a little more significant. So I'm gonna continue trying a little bit, probably off camera, with the wire wheel, see how far I can get. Otherwise, I might have to think about using some kind of chemical to be able to try to take that off. One of the issues I'm running into is I just honestly don't know just how deep the rust goes, and I don't want to try to grind too much away and end up putting a hole in the pipe, because I think these pipes are like anywhere from like 180 to like 300. I've been looking at a lot of parts, so I forget, but I remember it like being decently expensive for a new one of these. So I'm gonna try to continue ahead on this, try to keep on keeping on, and probably do that off camera and then jump on the next piece next.
What's up, guys? I'm back at it. I was just going through and taking that guy off. Let me take this guy off, and then I'll be able to tell you about what I just did.
Okay, so my face is probably gonna look kind of messed up from the mask, but I did kind of think about the fact that when I was going through off camera, trying to continue with the derusting, I probably should be wearing a mask, just because like there's rust dust shooting everywhere. So I threw my mask on. I would recommend one of those if you are gonna do something like this where you're wearing glasses and a mask. If you just use like a regular like COVID N95 mask, every time you breathe, your breath is gonna go up and then fog up the glasses, so like it's impossible. With that guy, you have to spend a little more obviously, but you can reuse it, replace the cartridges, and it doesn't fog your glasses up. So what I'm running into here, it's getting better, obviously. I continued on with the wire wheel. These guys are honestly getting a little blown out. I've used them for quite a few things, so I think ultimately I probably should just go get another set, so I can get a brand new one going. I went through with some, I think it's 300 grit sandpaper. Went through, got it a little bit better. These little pipes really aren't that big of a deal. They come clean pretty quick. But there definitely is still a good amount of like rusting. I'm gonna have to go through and do a little research, see what I can do to maybe expedite the process and hopefully not actually ruin the pipe, because I would like to get it looking new again. And if I do, I likely will paint it with some kind of like a sealant, Rust-Oleum paint or something. Probably just black, just something that can resist heat and will keep the metal protected so it won't rust again. It's probably all I have for today. Not too much going on, and honestly, no one really wants to sit here and just watch me in time lapses derust things all day. This is unfortunately kind of a boring part of the build. Like I said, I do have to go through. I still have finished this, get this guy all done, thermostat housing, get that all cleaned up, throttle body, these piping. I have a good amount of stuff to do, but like I said, it's just really boring. So if you're out there watching this and you have any tips or any ideas on how to get this rust done quicker or better ways to safely do it without ruining the pipe, please drop it in the comments below. I would really appreciate that. But with that being said, if you guys like the video, if you learned something, if you just, again, like watching a guy work on a car, please do like the video, share it, subscribe. It really means a lot to me. So with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, keep wrenching.